The card was black and warm from being inside the drawer, and when he placed it in my hand, I understood that my life was about to change in ways I could not predict. I was standing in his study with two other women, both of whom belonged there far more than I did. Rain streaked the windows behind his desk, blurring the garden into watercolour greens and greys. The fire in the hearth crackled and hissed, throwing shadows across the Persian rug and the leather-bound books that lined the walls. And Dante Valenti, the man whose floors I scrubbed and whose sheets I changed, and whose name made grown men go quiet, was handing me a credit card that looked like it had been carved from obsidian. "There is no limit," he said. His voice was low, unhurried, the voice of a man who had never needed to raise it. "You have 48 hours. Buy whatever you wish." I stared at the card. My name was not on it, only his. To my left stood Carmela Ferrante, his fiancée of 8 months. She was the daughter of a shipping magnate, a woman whose photograph appeared in society pages and whose wardrobe cost more than I would earn in a decade. Her dark hair was swept into a perfect chignon, not a strand out of place. Her dress was cream silk that moved like water when she breathed. Her engagement ring caught the firelight and scattered it across the ceiling in small dancing rainbows, a diamond so large it seemed to have its own gravity. To my right stood Natalia, his personal assistant, blonde, efficient, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She had been with him for 4 years. She knew more about his business than anyone except perhaps his consigliere. She scheduled his days, managed his communications, and looked at him in a way that made something cold settle in my stomach, the way a woman looks at something she believes she deserves but has not yet been given. And then there was me, Elena Morrow, 26 years old, former elementary school teacher from a town no one had heard of, current maid in the household of a man whose empire stretched across 3 continents and whose enemies had a habit of disappearing without explanation. I did not belong in this room. I knew it. They knew it. The only person who seemed unconcerned was Mr. Valenti himself. Carmela laughed, a musical sound that filled the space between us. "Dante, you're too generous. Is this for the wedding preparations?" He did not answer. He simply watched her with those slate-grey eyes, and after a moment her laughter faded into something uncertain. Her hand went to her necklace, a nervous gesture I had observed before when she was unsure of her footing. "I don't understand," Natalia said carefully. Her voice was measured, professional, revealing nothing. "What is the occasion?" "There is no occasion." He steepled his fingers, leaning back in his leather chair. "Consider it an experiment. I want to see what you choose when there are no constraints." I said nothing. I had learned in my 3 months in this house that silence was safer than speech in rooms like this, with men like him. I held the card and waited to be dismissed, feeling its weight like a question I did not know how to answer. "You may go," he said. "I'll expect the cards returned in 48 hours. Carmela swept out first, already tapping on her phone, her heels clicking against the hardwood with the confidence of a woman who had never doubted her place in the world. I heard her speaking to someone as she walked, something about reservations, about finally showing him what she was worth. Natalia followed, her posture perfect, her expression calculating. She paused at the door and looked back at him for just a moment, a look I filed away for later consideration. I turned to leave as well, but his voice stopped me at the threshold. "Elena," I turned back. He was watching me with an expression I could not read. The fire crackled. The rain continued its steady assault on the windows. "Yes, Mr. Valenti? You have questions." It was not a question itself. It was an observation. He had seen something in my face, some flicker I had failed to hide. I should not have been surprised. He saw everything. "It's not my place to have questions, sir." "And yet you have them anyway." He tilted his head slightly, studying me the way one might study an unexpected move on a chessboard. "You're wondering why you were included, Why a maid would be given the same opportunity as my fiancée and my assistant. I did not confirm or deny. I simply waited, keeping my face as neutral as I could manage. "You're wondering if this is a test," he continued. "And if so, what the correct answer is, what you're supposed to buy, what will please me and what will disappoint me." He paused. "You're wondering if your job depends on the choice you make." My throat felt tight. He had laid out my thoughts with surgical precision, and I did not know whether to be impressed or terrified. Perhaps both. "Your job does not depend on this," he said quietly. "Nothing depends on this. I simply want to know what you would choose. That's all." I nodded once and left the room, the card burning against my palm like a question I did not know how to answer. That night, I lay in my narrow bed in the servants' quarters and stared at the ceiling. The room was small, barely larger than a closet, with a single window that looked out over the service entrance and a bed that creaked whenever I moved. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from the eaves outside, a steady rhythm that should have been soothing but instead felt like a countdown. 48 hours. I thought about what I could buy. Clothes, perhaps. My wardrobe consisted of 3 identical black dresses for work, 2 pairs of worn shoes with soles that were starting to separate, and a coat that had belonged to my mother before she died. It still smelled like her sometimes, lavender and the particular soap she had used, and I could not decide if that was a comfort or a torment. I could buy something beautiful, something that made me feel like a person instead of a shadow that moved through other people's lives, noticed only when something was not clean. I thought about my brother. Marcus was 17, living with our aunt in Ohio, trying to finish high school while working nights at a grocery store to help with expenses. Our aunt was kind but overwhelmed, 3 children of her own and barely enough money to feed them. And then we had arrived, 2 more mouths that she had not planned for and could not afford. Marcus needed things. A laptop for his classes. He was doing his homework on his phone, squinting at the small screen, falling behind because he could not type fast enough. New shoes that did not have holes in the soles. Money for the college application fees that would let him apply to schools he had no chance of affording. I thought about the medical bills that still followed me, like ghosts. My mother's cancer treatment. 2 years of chemotherapy and surgeries and hospital stays that had consumed everything we had and then kept consuming, even after she was gone. The insurance had covered some of it, but not enough. Never enough. I was still paying them off, still watching each paycheck disappear into the endless void of debt that her death had left behind. At this rate, I would be paying until I was 50, until I was 60, until I died still owing money to hospitals and doctors who had not been able to save her anyway. I could pay off those bills. I could free myself from the weight that had been pressing on my chest for 3 years. I could send money to Marcus, to our aunt, could make their lives easier. I could buy myself clothes and shoes and a coat that was not held together by memories and thread. But something stopped me. Something about the way Mr. Valenti had looked at me when he handed me that card. The way he had said it was not a test when... Everything about it felt like exactly that. I did not trust gifts. I had learned not to. In my experience, gifts always came with strings. They came with expectations, with debts that would be called in later when you least expected it, in ways you could not predict. My father had taught me that lesson before he left. The way he would bring flowers and promises after every fight, every disappearance, every time my mother cried into her pillow thinking we could not hear. Gifts were apologies for things that had not happened yet. Gifts were down payments on future pain. I fell asleep with the card under my pillow, and in my dreams, I watched it turn to ash in my hands. The next morning I went about my duties as usual. I woke at 5, as I always did, and dressed in the dark. The servants' quarters were quiet. Most of the other staff did not start until 6, and I liked this hour, the stillness of it, the sense that the house belonged to no one and I could move through it like a ghost. I cleaned the guest bathrooms on the 3rd floor first, scrubbing tile until my knuckles ached. The bathrooms were rarely used. Mr. Valenti did not entertain often, but they had to be spotless anyway. That was the rule. Everything had to be spotless, whether anyone would see it or not. I had learned not to question the logic of wealthy people. They lived by different rules than the rest of us, rules that made sense only to themselves. I polished the silver in the dining room next, each piece reflecting my distorted face back at me. I looked tired. I was tired. I had been tired for 3 years, since the first diagnosis, since the first surgery, since the night my mother had looked at me from her hospital bed and said, "I'm sorry, baby, I'm so sorry," as if dying was something she needed to apologize for, as if leaving us was a choice she was making out of selfishness. I changed the linens in the master bedroom while Mr. Valenti was in his office on a call that made his voice go sharp and cold. I could hear him through the walls, not the words, just the tone. Someone had disappointed him. Someone was going to regret it. I made the bed with hospital corners and did not think about what kind of man could make that voice sound like a death sentence. I saw Carmela leave around noon. She was dressed in a white coat that probably cost more than my car had before I sold it to pay for my mother's funeral. She was laughing into her phone, and I heard fragments as she passed. Something about Cartier, about reservations, about making him see what he was getting. I saw Natalia leave an hour later, her expression focused and determined. She carried a leather folder full of papers, and she did not look at me as she passed. I was furniture to her. I was less than furniture. Furniture at least had value. I did not leave. I continued cleaning. I continued being invisible. It was late afternoon when my phone buzzed with a call from a number I did not recognize. I was on my break, sitting in the small garden behind the kitchen where the staff sometimes ate lunch when the weather was nice. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still grey, heavy with clouds that threatened more. I almost did not answer. I did not know anyone who would call me, and unknown numbers usually meant bill collectors, meant demands I could not meet, meant voices that did not care about my explanations or my pain. But something made me swipe the screen. A woman's voice, tired and frightened, speaking rapid Spanish. My Spanish was not good. I had learned some from the families at the school where I used to teach, picking up words and phrases from the children who spoke it at home. But I understood enough. The free clinic where I volunteered on my days off. The one in the neighborhood where I had grown up, where my mother had taken me when I was small and we could not afford a real doctor. There was a child there, a little girl 5 years old with pneumonia that had turned severe. Her mother was undocumented. She was terrified to take her daughter to a hospital, terrified of being separated from her child, terrified of the system that had already taken so much from people like her. The clinic did not have the medication they needed. They did not have the equipment. They had called everyone they could think of who might help. And somehow my name had come up. Elena, who used to bring supplies when she could scrape together a few dollars. Elena, who had organized that small fundraiser last year that had raised almost $200. Elena, who always seemed to find a way even when there was no way to find. I had not told them about my new job. I had not told them that I no longer lived in that neighborhood, that I slept in a mansion now, that I polished silver and changed sheets for a man whose watch cost more than the clinic's entire annual budget. I simply said I would come. The pharmacy was 6 blocks from the clinic in a strip mall. That had seen better days. The windows were covered with faded advertisements for flu shots and discount vitamins, the paint peeling, the parking lot cracked and weedy. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered, casting everything in a harsh, clinical glow that made everyone look sick. I found the antibiotics on the 3rd shelf from the bottom, a small white box with a name I could barely pronounce. The pharmacist, a tired-looking man with glasses and a coffee stain on his coat, told me the price. $87. It was not a large number, not by the standards of the world I now inhabited. Mr. Valenti probably spent more than that on a single bottle of wine. Carmela's engagement ring could have bought these antibiotics 1,000 times over and still had enough left for a small house. But it was more than I had in my bank account, more than I would have until my next paycheck, which was still 2 weeks away. I had $43 to my name, $43 to last until the end of the month, to cover food and bus fare and the small necessities that kept a life running. I stood there for a long moment staring at the small white box in my hands. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me. The pharmacist waited, his expression bored. I thought about putting it back. I thought about explaining to the woman at the clinic that I was sorry, that I had tried, that there was nothing I could do. I thought about a 5-year-old girl with lungs full of fluid, struggling to breathe, her mother holding her hand and praying to a God who did not seem to be listening. And then I reached into my pocket and felt the edge of that black card. "There is no limit," he had said. "Buy whatever you wish." I thought about Carmela at Cartier, surrounded by velvet displays and champagne, choosing diamonds that would sparkle at parties she would attend on his arm. I thought about Natalia with her leather folder buying something strategic, something calculated, something that would make him see her value. I thought about what they would say if they could see me now, standing in a discount pharmacy in a neighborhood they would never visit, holding a box of generic antibiotics for a child they would never know existed. I handed the card to the pharmacist. "Just this," I said. "Just the antibiotics." He looked at the card. He looked at me, at my plain coat, my worn shoes, my face that showed every year of exhaustion and grief and struggle. His eyes narrowed slightly, suspicious. "This your card?" "I'm authorized to use it." He did not look convinced, but he ran it anyway, and it went through. The total was $62.14. The $87 antibiotics were on sale, apparently. A small mercy. I signed the receipt with Mr. Valenti's name, and my hand did not shake. The clinic was a 15-minute walk from the pharmacy. I had walked those streets 1,000 times before, past the bodega where my mother used to buy lottery tickets she could not afford, past the laundromat where I had done homework while our clothes tumbled dry, past the apartment building where I had lived until I was 18, and then again when my mother got sick and I had to come back. The clinic was in the basement of a church, down a narrow staircase that smelled of mildew and disinfectant. The waiting room was crowded. It was always crowded, with people who had nowhere else to go. A woman with a crying baby, an old man with a cough that rattled in his chest, a teenager with a bruise on her face that she kept touching, as if reminding herself it was there. The little girl was in the back room, lying on a cot that had seen better days. She was small and pale, her dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, her breathing laboured and wet. Her mother sat beside her, clutching her hand, and when she saw me, her face crumpled with relief. "Elena," she said, "gracias, gracias." I gave them the medication. I showed the clinic's volunteer nurse, a retired woman named Dorothy who had been doing this for 30 years, how to administer it, what signs to watch for, when to call for more help if her condition worsened. The little girl's name was Maria. Her mother's name was Rosa. Rosa had crossed the border 3 years ago with Maria in her arms, fleeing a husband who had put her in the hospital twice. She cleaned houses now. Like me, I thought. We are the same. We are invisible in other people's lives, and she sent money home to her mother in Guatemala when she could. She tried to pay me for the medicine. She reached into her purse and pulled out a handful of crumpled bills, maybe $20, maybe less, and held them out to me with shaking hands. "No," I said, "keep it." "But keep it. For Maria. For food. For whatever you need." She started crying then, quiet tears that she tried to hide, her hand pressed over her mouth. I did not know what to do, so I simply sat with her while Maria slept and the antibiotics began to do their work. I stayed until the girl's breathing eased, until the fever started to break, until Rosa stopped crying and started to believe that her daughter might be okay. And then I walked back to the mansion in the dark, the black card in my pocket barely lighter than when I had left. and I did not tell anyone what I had done. The 48 hours passed. I returned the card to Mr. Valenti's study at exactly the time he had specified. The room looked different in the evening light, softer somehow, the fire burning lower, the shadows longer. Carmela was already there, surrounded by shopping bags from stores whose names I recognized from magazines I had never been able to afford. The bags were glossy, expensive, each one a different colour: robin's egg blue from Tiffany, black and white from Chanel, the distinctive orange of Hermès. Natalia stood beside her, composed as always, her hands empty but her expression satisfied. Mr. Valenti sat behind his desk. He looked tired, I thought. There were shadows under his eyes that had not been there 2 days ago. He looked at each of us in turn. When his gaze reached me, it lingered for a moment longer than it had on the others. I felt exposed under that look, as if he could see through my skin to the secrets underneath. "Thank you for returning these," he said. "You may go." That was all. No questions about what we had bought. No discussion of the experiment. No reveal of what he had been testing or who had passed or failed. Carmela's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disappointment, indignation. She was not used to being dismissed. "But don't you want to know what I chose?" "I already know." His voice was flat. "I can see the bags." "I bought the most stunning necklace," she said, undeterred by his tone. She reached into one of the bags and pulled out a velvet box, opening it to reveal a cascade of emeralds and diamonds that caught the firelight and threw it back in brilliant sparks. "They reminded me of your mother's ring, the one in the portrait in the gallery. I thought it would be perfect for the wedding. Everyone will see how generous you are, how much I... What?" His voice had not changed, but something in the room had shifted. The temperature, perhaps. The quality of the light. Carmela's smile faltered. "How much you care for me." He said nothing. He simply looked at her with those slate-grey eyes until her enthusiasm crumbled and her hands, holding the velvet box, began to shake. "Natalia," he said, turning away from his fiancée, "what did you purchase?" "A first-edition collection of treatises on Mediterranean trade routes," she said smoothly. If she had noticed the tension in the room, she gave no sign. "17th century, for your library. I know you've been searching for them for years. You mentioned it to Mr. Ricardo last month. Tracked down a collector in Florence who was willing to part with them for the right price." Something flickered in his expression. Interest, perhaps. Or something else. A recognition that I could not quite read. "And you, Elena?" I felt both women turn to look at me. I felt the weight of their judgment, their curiosity, their barely concealed contempt. The maid included in something she had no business being part of. The maid standing in this room full of silk and diamonds, wearing a dress that cost less than Carmela's earrings. "Antibiotics," I said. $62. The silence that followed was absolute. The fire crackled. The rain had started again outside, a soft susurration against the windows. Carmela laughed first. A sharp, disbelieving sound that was not quite a laugh at all. "Antibiotics? With an unlimited black card? Were you ill?" "No, ma'am." "Then what on earth?" She stopped herself, her lips pressing together in a thin line. As if remembering that speaking to the maid was beneath her dignity. Mr. Valenti's expression had not changed, but something in his posture had shifted, a stillness that had not been there before. He was watching me the way he had watched me in this room 2 days ago, as if I were a chess piece that had moved in an unexpected direction. "Why?" he asked. It was the first real question he had asked any of us, not what. Why? "There was a child who needed them," I said simply. My voice was steady. I had done nothing wrong. I had nothing to hide. "A clinic where I volunteered didn't have the supplies. The girl's mother couldn't afford them. I used the card because I didn't have the money myself." "You used my card to buy medication for a stranger's child?" "Yes, sir." More silence. I could feel Carmela's contempt radiating off her like heat. I could see Natalia's calculating gaze, trying to determine if I had somehow outmaneuvered them both through sheer audacity. "Is the child better?" he asked. The question surprised me. It should not have. It was a reasonable question, a logical follow-up, but something about the way he asked it, the way his voice softened almost imperceptibly, caught me off guard. "She was improving when I left. The medication should clear the infection within a few days." He nodded once. Then he looked down at the papers on his desk, and I understood that we were dismissed. I returned to my duties. I did not think about the experiment again, did not wonder what he had learned or what conclusions he had drawn. I simply continued to clean, to polish, to maintain the house that was not mine, to be invisible in the spaces between his life. It was 5 days later when everything changed. I was in the kitchen at midnight, which was not unusual. I often came down after the other staff had gone to bed, to make tea and sit in the silence and pretend for a few minutes that I was somewhere else. Somewhere I was not defined by the work I did for other people. Somewhere I was still the person I had been before my mother got sick and my father left and my life narrowed down to survival and debt and the endless work of staying afloat. The kitchen was my favourite room in the house. It was large and professional, all stainless steel and white tile, but at night, with only a single lamp burning, it felt almost cosy. I would make tea, always chamomile, the way my mother used to make it, and sit at the small table by the window, looking out at the garden. I did not expect him to be there. He was standing by the window, looking out at the garden where rain was falling silver in the moonlight. He was still dressed in his suit from the day, but his jacket was off, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, his tie loosened. In 3 months, I had never seen him anything less than perfectly composed. Now he looked almost human. He looked tired in a way I had never seen him look before. Tired and something else. Something that looked almost like grief. I started to back out of the room, my bare feet silent on the tile, but he spoke without turning. "Stay." It was not a request, but it was not quite an order either. It was something in between, a word that acknowledged my presence without demanding anything from it. I stayed. He did not say anything else for a long time. He simply stood there, watching the rain, and I stood by the doorway, watching him. The silence stretched between us, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had nothing to prove to each other, nothing to pretend. "Do you know why I gave you that card?" he asked finally. "No, sir." "I wanted to see what people would do when they thought no one was watching, when there were no consequences, when they could have anything they wanted." He turned to face me. His eyes were dark in the dim light, unreadable. "Carmela bought jewellery. She bought it for herself and called it a wedding gift. She thought that was clever. She thought I would, be impressed by her taste, her style, her ability to spend my money beautifully." I said nothing. "Natalia bought something for me, but she bought it because she wanted me to see her thoughtfulness, her value, her indispensability." He paused. "She has been with me for 4 years. She knows my business better than almost anyone. And in 4 years, she has never once done something without calculating how it would benefit her." I still said nothing. I sensed that he was not looking for a response. He was thinking out loud, working through something that had been troubling him. "You bought medicine for a child you did not know. A child whose mother was afraid. You spent $62 out of unlimited funds and you did not tell anyone. You did not mention it at dinner. You did not find a way to bring it up in conversation so that I would know. You simply did it and came back and continued working as if nothing had happened. It wasn't important. It was the most important thing anyone did with those cards." He took a step toward me. "Do you know how I found out?" I shook my head. "I track every purchase made on my accounts. I saw the receipt. A pharmacy in a neighborhood I did not recognize. I had someone look into it." He took another step. "They found the clinic. They spoke to the staff. They told me about the little girl with pneumonia, about the maid from the Valenti house who had come in the rain with medicine and stayed until morning." My throat was tight. I'm sorry, I should have asked permission. You should have. He took another step. He was close enough now that I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair, the weariness that softened the hard planes of his face. But I'm glad you didn't. Why? Because if you had asked, I would have wondered if you were performing, if you were trying to impress me, if the kindness was real or calculated. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. You didn't ask. You didn't perform. You simply did what you thought was right, even though it could have cost you everything. You used my money without permission. You could have been fired. You could have been accused of theft. And you did it anyway. It was only $62. It was never about the money. His eyes held mine. It was about the choice, what you chose to do when you thought no one would know. I did not realize I was crying until I felt the tears on my face. I did not know why I was crying, perhaps because no one had looked at me the way he was looking at me now in a very long time, as if I was visible, as if I mattered, as if the choices I made in the dark, when no one was watching, were worth something. The wedding is off, he said. I stared at him, the tears forgotten. What? Carmela and I. The engagement is over. He said it flatly, as if he were reporting the weather. I ended it this afternoon. Because of the card? Because of what the card revealed? He paused, and I saw something flicker in his expression. Not regret, exactly, but something close to it. I have been with her for 8 months. I thought I knew what she was. I thought I could live with it. With someone who saw me as an acquisition, a prize, a means to an end. He shook his head slowly. I was wrong. I should have said something, offered condolences, expressed surprise. But all I could think about was the way he had said means to an end, as if he were describing himself, as if he were the one who had been used. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you need to understand what comes next. He met my eyes, and I saw in them something I had never seen before, not vulnerability exactly, but an openness, a willingness to be seen. I need someone I can trust, someone who will tell me the truth when everyone else is lying, someone who will act according to their conscience, not according to what they think I want. I'm a maid, Mr. Valenti. Not anymore. He said it simply, as if he were stating a fact, as if my entire life had not just shifted on its axis. I'm offering you a position, he continued, not as a servant, as something else, a role that doesn't have a name yet, someone who sees things, someone who tells me what they see, someone who... He stopped, reconsidered, started again. I have many people who work for me. I have very few people who work with me. I'm asking you to be one of them. I should have said no. I should have recognized the danger in what he was offering, the intimacy, the proximity, the exposure. I should have remembered all the reasons I had learned to be invisible, to stay small, to never draw the attention of powerful men. But I thought about my brother. I thought about the medical bills. I thought about the little girl in the clinic who was breathing easier now because I had made a choice. What would you need me to do? I asked. Watch. Listen. Tell me the truth. He paused. I'll pay. You 5 times your current salary. You'll have your own suite in the guest wing. You'll have access to whatever you need to do your job, and you'll answer only to me. And if I see something you don't want to see? If I tell you a truth you don't want to hear? He smiled then, a small, unexpected expression that transformed his face, made him look almost young. Then I'll know I chose the right person. The transition happened quickly. Within a week, I had moved from the servants' quarters to a suite on the 3rd floor with windows overlooking the garden. The room was larger than any I had ever lived in. A sitting area with a small sofa and a desk, a bedroom with a bed that did not creak, a bathroom with a tub deep enough to drown in. I stood in the center of it on my first night and did not know what to do with myself. I had new clothes delivered the next day, simple but well made, the kind that did not draw attention but did not mark me as staff either. Dark slacks, White, blouses, a blazer that fit perfectly. I looked at myself in the mirror and did not recognize the woman looking back. Carmela had left the day after the engagement ended. I watched her go from my window, her car loaded with luggage, her face a mask of fury she was too proud to let anyone see. She had screamed at him, according to the other staff. She had thrown things. She had threatened to tell everyone what kind of man he really was. He had simply looked at her and said, "Everyone already knows." Natalia remained, but she looked at me differently now, with suspicion, with calculation, with the wariness of someone who had lost a competition she had not known she was in. I could feel her watching me when she thought I was not looking, taking my measure, trying to understand what had happened. I did not explain. I did not owe her an explanation. And besides, I was not entirely sure I understood it myself. Dante, I still called him Mr. Valenti to his face, but I had begun to think of him as Dante in the privacy of my own mind, sent me documents to read, reports on his businesses, his competitors, his enemies, dossiers on people who worked for him, people who wanted to work for him, people who wanted to destroy him. Learn who they are, he told me. Learn what they want, then tell me what you see. So I learned. I learned that the Valenti Empire was built on 3 pillars: shipping, real estate, and something called consulting, that was never clearly defined. I learned that his father had built the foundation, brutally, obviously, through violence and intimidation, and that Dante had spent the years since his father's death transforming the empire into something more sophisticated, more subtle, more dangerous. I learned that he made people afraid not by threatening them, but by knowing things about them that they did not want known. He collected secrets the way other men collected art. He used them sparingly, surgically, and the mere possibility that he might know something was often enough to ensure cooperation. I learned that he was dangerous, but I had always known that. Now I understood the nature of the danger. It was not rage, it was not cruelty, it was certainty. He moved through the world with the absolute confidence of a man who had never been wrong, and I did not know what would happen when he finally was. 6 weeks after my promotion, I gave him my first real report. It was about Natalia. I had been watching her, as I watched everyone. It had become second nature by then. The observation, the filing away of small details, the pattern recognition that I had developed in those years of being invisible. People revealed themselves in the small things, in the moments when they thought no one was looking. Natalia was no different. I noticed the late nights she spent in his office when he was away, the way she lingered over certain documents before filing them, the calls she made from the garden speaking in a low voice to someone whose name she never said. I followed the trail carefully, quietly, the way I had learned to do everything. I checked the phone records she thought were private. I noted the documents she photographed when she thought the office was empty. I tracked the patterns of her behavior and built a picture that made my stomach turn. She was selling information to a man named Ricci, a competitor, someone who wanted to know which properties Dante was planning to acquire, which contracts he was negotiating, which weaknesses could be exploited. I brought the evidence to him late one evening. He was in his study, as he often was, surrounded by papers and the glow of his computer screen. The fire had burned down to embers, and the room was filled with shadows. I placed a folder on his desk and told him what I had found. I showed him the photographs I had taken, the phone records I had compiled, the timeline of her betrayal. He listened without interruption. He read the documents without expression, and when he was finished, he sat back in his chair and looked at me with those unreadable eyes. "How long have you known?" 3 weeks. I wanted to be sure. "You could have come to me sooner. You would have asked for proof." I wanted to have it ready. He nodded slowly. "And what do you think I should do?" It was the first time he had asked me that question. Not what I had seen, what I thought. I considered my answer carefully. I thought about Natalia, Her efficiency, her intelligence, the 4 years she had spent building herself into someone indispensable. I thought about what her betrayal meant, what it revealed about the people closest to him. If you confront her directly, she'll deny it. You'll have to decide whether the proof is enough to act on, or if you need more. If you don't confront her, you can control what information she sends to Ricci, use her to mislead him. But that's risky. If she realizes you know, she becomes dangerous. And if I simply remove her? I understood what he meant. I understood what remove meant in his world. The word hung in the air between us, and I felt the weight of it. The weight of what I was being asked to participate in, even if only as a witness. That's your decision, I said quietly. Not mine. He studied me for a long moment. I did not look away. I had learned that from him. The power of holding someone's gaze, of not flinching, of letting silence speak for itself. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. You're learning? Natalia was gone by the end of the week. I did not know where she went. I did not ask. I simply noted her absence and continued my work, adding her name to the list of people who had underestimated what invisibility could see. The threat arrived in September, disguised as a gift, a letter, hand-delivered by a courier who disappeared before anyone could question him. Cream-coloured envelope, expensive paper, Dante's name written in elegant calligraphy. The courier had no return address, no identifying features, no trail that anyone could follow. He had simply appeared, handed the letter to Mr. Bianchi at the front door, and vanished. I was in the study when Dante opened it. I had developed the habit of being present when he dealt with correspondence, watching for anything unusual, anything that might warrant closer attention. Usually the letters were routine, business proposals, invitations, the endless stream of requests that came to a man of his position. This one was different. I knew it the moment he read it. Something changed in his face, a tightening around the eyes, a stillness in his posture that I had never seen before. He looked almost afraid, and that scared me more than anything else could have. I had not believed he was capable of fear. What is it? I asked. He did not answer immediately. He simply stared at the letter, his jaw tight, his eyes dark with something that looked almost like grief. An old enemy, he finally said. Someone I thought was dead. Who? He looked at me then, and I saw him weigh the question. Decide how much to tell me, decide how much I could be trusted with. His name was Ferrante, he said, Carmela's father. I remembered the name, the shipping magnate, the father of the woman who had bought emeralds and called them a wedding gift. He died 3 years ago. Or so I was told. Dante set the letter down on his desk. His hands, I noticed, were not quite steady. This letter suggests otherwise. The story came out slowly, over the course of several days. Dante told me pieces of it, fragments, each one revealing a little more of the history that had shaped him. Ferrante had been his father's rival for decades. The two families had fought over territory, over contracts, over the right to control the shipping lanes that brought goods in and out of the city. The conflict had been brutal, personal, marked by violence on both sides. Dante's older brother had been killed, in it when Dante was 19. An ambush, a betrayal by someone they had trusted, a message from Ferrante that the war would not end until one family was destroyed. His name was Marco, Dante said. We were in the garden late at night. He had taken to walking there when he could not sleep, and I had taken to walking with him. My brother, he was 23. He was going to take over the business. He stopped, swallowed. He was everything I was not. Confident, charismatic, born to lead. My father loved him in a way he never loved me. What happened? Ferrante happened. He got to someone on the inside, one of our drivers, a man who had worked for my family for 15 years. The driver led Marco into an ambush. They found his body 3 days later. I did not say anything. I simply walked beside him, letting him tell the story at his own pace. My father wanted revenge. Direct. Immediate. Bloody. He wanted to march into Ferrante's territory and burn everything to the ground. Dante shook his head slowly. I convinced him to wait, to plan, to be strategic instead of emotional. What did you do? I dismantled Ferrante's empire piece by piece. I bought his allies. I exposed his secrets. I turned his own people against him. His voice was flat, mechanical, as if he were reciting facts from a report. Within 5 years, he was ruined, bankrupt, humiliated. His wife left him. His children, except Carmela, refused to speak to him. He had nothing left. And then he died. And then he supposedly died. Dante stopped walking and turned to face me. There was a car accident, a fire, a body that was too badly burned to identify. I should have known. I should have suspected. But I was tired of the war. I wanted it to be over. And the engagement to Carmela? A gesture of peace. Or so I thought. His laugh was bitter. Her family approached me. They said they wanted to end the feud, to start fresh. I thought I was being strategic, bringing them into the fold where I could watch them. But that wasn't what they wanted. No, they wanted access, information, a way back in. He handed me the letter, and I read it in the moonlight. The message was simple. 7 words in elegant script. I'm coming for everything you love. The investigation took 3 months. I did it carefully, invisibly, the way I had learned to do everything. I watched, I listened, I traced connections, and built a map of betrayal that spread through Dante's organization like rot through wood. It started with Bianchi. Mr. Bianchi had been the head of household staff for 30 years, longer than Dante had been running the empire. He had worked for Dante's father and his grandfather before that. He was family in every way that mattered, or so everyone had believed. I watched him for 2 weeks before I found the first crack in his facade. It was small, a phone call he made from the wine cellar, where he thought no one could hear. But I had learned that the acoustics in the cellar carried through the old ventilation system, and if you stood in exactly the right spot in the hallway above, you could hear everything. He was speaking to someone about schedules, about which days Dante would be in the office, which days he would be travelling, about the gaps in security, the moments of vulnerability, the opportunities for someone who wanted to get close. I followed the thread. More phone calls, more patterns, money appearing in a bank account that Bianchi thought was hidden, meetings in coffee shops and parking lots with men I photographed from a distance. The investigation expanded. Bianchi was not alone. He had recruited others, slowly, carefully, over the course of months or maybe years. A driver who owed gambling debts, a gardener whose daughter needed an operation, a maid who had been promised papers for her undocumented brother. Each one had a reason to betray, and Ferrante had found every single one. I documented everything. I built files. I created timelines and connection maps and evidence that could not be denied. And then I found the threat to Marcus. It was in a folder I was not supposed to see, a folder that Bianchi kept locked in his desk, that I accessed one night when everyone else was asleep. Inside were photographs. Photographs of my brother, Marcus at his high school, Marcus at the grocery store where he worked, Marcus walking to our aunt's house, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his headphones in, completely unaware that he was being watched. There was a note attached to the photographs in handwriting I did not recognize. Insurance, if she becomes a problem. I stood in Bianchi's office staring at those photographs, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not fear. I had moved past fear somewhere in the last 3 months. Something harder. Something that felt almost like resolve. They knew about me. They knew I was a threat. And they had decided to use my brother as leverage. I brought everything to Dante that night. The full investigation. The names, 23 of them now, 23 people who had sold their loyalty. and the photographs of Marcus. He looked at them in silence. His face did not change, but I saw his hands tighten on the edge of the desk. How long have they been watching him? I don't know. The photographs are dated over the last 6 weeks. And you didn't notice? You didn't see anything in their behavior that suggested… No. My voice was steady, but something cracked beneath it. I was watching them. I wasn't watching him. He looked at me then, and I saw something in his eyes that I did not expect. Not anger, not disappointment. Something softer, something that might have been understanding. "This is not your fault," he said quietly. "They're using him to control me, to neutralize me. If I become a problem, they won't touch him." His voice was absolute, certain in a way that left no room for doubt. "I'll have people on him within the hour. Surveillance. Protection. He won't know they're there, but they will be. And if that's not enough, then we bring him here." He stood and crossed to where I was standing. He was close enough that I could see the pulse beating in his throat, the tension in his jaw. "Elena, look at me." I looked. "I will not let them hurt him. I will not let them hurt you. Do you understand?" I nodded. I did not trust my voice. "Now, tell me who else is on that list," I told him. 23 names, 23 people who had worked for him, some for years, some for decades. His head of security, his accountant, his driver, Mr. Bianchi, who had known him since he was a child. When I finished, the silence in the room was absolute. "We move tonight," Dante said finally, "before they realize we know." The purge happened in darkness. I did not see most of it. Dante had been clear that I was to stay in the house, stay in my room, stay safe, while his people dealt with the traitors. But I heard things. Phones ringing, cars arriving and departing, the sound of footsteps in the hallway at 3 in the morning, then 4, then 5. By dawn, it was over. 23 people had been removed from Dante's organization. Some had been arrested. Dante had connections in law enforcement, evidence that could be used to build cases. Some had simply disappeared. I did not ask where they had gone. I did not want to know. Bianchi had been among the last. I watched from my window as they led him out of the house. 2 men in dark suits, their faces expressionless, their hands firm on his arms. He looked old in the grey morning light, old and broken and afraid. He had known Dante since childhood. He had been at his christening, his first communion, his brother's funeral. He had served 3 generations of Valentis with apparent loyalty and devotion. And all along, he had been waiting for the opportunity to destroy them. Dante came to my room after it was done. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his clothes rumpled, his face pale and drawn. But there was something else in his expression too. Something that looked almost like relief. "It's done," he said. "All of them. All of them." He crossed to the window and stood where I had been standing, looking out at the garden. "Ferrante knows we've moved against his people. He'll be coming now. There's nothing left to wait for. What happens next? We find him. We end this." He turned to look at me. "Your brother is safe. I have 3 men on him around the clock. He thinks they're new employees at the store. Thank you. Don't thank me. It's my fault he was in danger in the first place. If I hadn't brought you into this, I chose to be here." My voice was firm. "I chose to stay. This is not your fault." He looked at me for a long moment. I saw him weighing something, deciding something, struggling with something he could not quite name. "I need to tell you something," he said finally. "What?" "When I gave you that card, the test, I already knew what you would do." I blinked. "What?" "I had you watched for weeks before that night. I knew about the clinic, the supplies you bought with your own money, the children you helped." He paused. "I knew what kind of person you were. The test was never for you. It was for them, Carmela and Natalia. I wanted to see what they would do when they had a baseline to compare against." I stared at him. Everything I thought I understood about the last year shifted, rearranged itself, became something different. You chose me before the test, I said slowly. You already knew. I knew you were good. I didn't know if you were strong. He took a step toward me. Now I know both. Why are you telling me this now? Because what comes next will be difficult. Ferrante is coming. There will be violence. There will be loss. His eyes searched my face. I need to know that you're with me. Not because I'm paying you, not because you feel obligated, because you choose to be. I thought about everything he had told me, the manipulation, the calculation, the careful orchestration of the test that had changed my life. I thought about the fact that he had seen me, truly seen me, before I ever stepped into that study. I thought about Marcus, safe now because of men I had never met, protected by resources I could never have provided on my own. I thought about $62 and a choice made in the dark. I'm with you, I said. I choose to be. He kissed me. It was not soft. It was not gentle. It was the kiss of a man who had spent his life controlling everything and was finally letting himself be out of control. His hands came up to frame my face, and I felt the tremor in them, the barely contained emotion that he kept locked away from the rest of the world. I kissed him back, and nothing was ever the same after that. The war with Ferrante lasted 4 months. It happened mostly in shadows, in boardrooms and back alleys, in the careful dismantling of alliances and the strategic destruction of resources. Dante was methodical, patient, devastating. He did not strike in rage. He struck with precision, cutting off Ferrante's supply lines, turning his remaining allies, exposing secrets that should have stayed buried forever. I was with him through all of it. Not as a soldier. I was not trained for that kind of work, and he would not have allowed it even if I were. But as a presence, a witness, a confidant who heard his plans and offered my observations and watched him navigate a world that would have destroyed anyone less formidable. There were moments when I wondered if I should look away, when I saw men leave his office with fear in their eyes, when I heard reports of accidents that were not accidents, of disappearances that left no traces, of justice that operated outside any system of law. But I stayed, because the alternative was leaving. And somewhere in those dark months, I discovered that I could not. I was in love with him. I did not know when it had happened. Perhaps it had been there from the beginning, growing slowly in the silence between us, taking root in the darkness where no one else could see. But it was true now, undeniable, as much a part of me as my own heartbeat. He never said the words, but I saw them in the way he looked at me, in the way he reached for me in the night when the weight of what he was doing became too heavy to bear alone. I saw them in the way he trusted me with secrets he had never told another soul, in the way he let me see the parts of himself that he kept hidden from everyone else. The first real battle came in February. Ferrante had made a move, an attempt to seize one of Dante's shipping warehouses, a building on the waterfront that served as a hub for half his legitimate business. The intelligence came through one of our remaining sources, 20 men, heavily armed, planning to strike at midnight. Dante prepared for 3 days. He called in reinforcements, rearranged his security, planned every detail of the defense with the precision of a general preparing for war. I was not supposed to be there. I was supposed to be at the house safe, waiting. But I had been reviewing the reports one last time, and I had seen something that did not fit, a name that appeared in 2 places it should not have been, a pattern that suggested our information might be compromised. I went to the warehouse to tell him, to warn him before it was too late. I arrived as the shooting started. The warehouse was chaos. Gunfire echoed off the metal walls. Men shouted in the darkness, their voices sharp with fear and adrenaline. I found cover behind a stack of shipping containers and pressed myself flat against the cold metal, trying to make sense of what was happening. I could see muzzle flashes in the darkness. I could hear the sounds of violence, the crack of gunfire, the thud of bodies hitting the ground, the screaming that was worse than either. And then I saw Dante. He was moving through the warehouse with a calm that seemed impossible under the circumstances. He directed his men with hand signals, took cover when necessary, and when one of Ferrante's people got too close, he dealt with them with brutal efficiency. I had known he was dangerous. I had known what he was capable of, in theory. But watching it, actually seeing him in this element was something different entirely. A hand closed around my arm and I nearly screamed, "What the hell are you doing here?" It was Dante, his face smeared with something dark, his breathing heavy, his eyes wild with a mixture of rage and fear. "There's a traitor," I gasped. "Someone on your side. The information was compromised." "I know. We handled it." His grip on my arm tightened. "You were supposed to stay at the house. I had to warn you. You could have been killed." His voice cracked on the last word, and I realized it was not rage I was seeing in his eyes. It was terror. For me. "Do you understand that? You could have—" An explosion somewhere in the warehouse cut him off. He pulled me down, covering my body with his as debris rained around us. When the dust settled, he pulled back and looked at me. His face was inches from mine. "When this is over," he said quietly, "we are going to have a conversation about the difference between brave and stupid. I'll look forward to it." Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. Then he was gone, disappearing back into the chaos, and I was left alone with the sound of my own heartbeat and the distant crack of gunfire. The battle ended an hour later. Dante's forces prevailed, but not without cost. 3 of his men were dead. 7 more were injured. The warehouse was damaged and would need weeks of repairs before it could operate again. But they had survived. And Ferrante had lost 20 men, including 2 of his lieutenants. It was a victory, but it did not feel like one. The second battle came in March. Ferrante had kidnapped Marco Bellini, one of Dante's most trusted lieutenants, a man who had been with the family for 15 years. The ransom demand was not money. It was Dante himself, a meeting, alone, in exchange for Marco's life. "It's a trap," I said when he showed me the message. "Obviously." "You can't go." "I have to." His voice was flat, the voice he used when he had made a decision and would not be swayed. "Marco has a family, a wife who's pregnant with their 2nd child, a daughter who just turned 6. If I don't go, Ferrante will kill him, and then he'll keep killing until I have no one left." "Then let me come with you." "No." "Dante—" "No." He turned to face me, and I saw the fear he was trying to hide. "This is not a discussion. You stay here. You stay safe. That's not negotiable. And if you don't come back," he smiled, "then—" It was a sad smile, resigned and tender and filled with things he had never quite been able to say. "Then you'll know I loved you," he said quietly. He went, and I waited. I did not wait passively. While Dante was meeting with Ferrante, I was coordinating with his remaining lieutenants. I had spent months learning how the organization worked, who could be trusted, how the pieces fit together. Now I used that knowledge. I directed surveillance teams to secondary locations where Ferrante might be holding Marco. I analyzed patterns in Ferrante's communications, looking for anything that might give us an advantage. I made decisions that were not mine to make, and I did not apologize for them. When the call came, Dante's voice strained but alive, telling me that he had Marco and they were coming home, I felt something break open in my chest. Relief. Terror. Love so overwhelming I could hardly breathe. They arrived at the house 3 hours later. Dante was bruised, exhausted, his knuckles split and bloody. Marco was worse, broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, signs of torture that made my stomach turn. But they were alive. "You moved the surveillance teams," Dante said to me later, after the doctors had come and gone and Marco was resting. "Yes." "You found Ferrante's secondary location." "Yes." "That information let us get Marco out. If we hadn't known about the backup site—" "I know." He looked at me for a long moment. I saw him processing what I had done, what it meant, what kind of person I had become in the months since he had first handed me that black card. "You're not the same woman who bought $62 of antibiotics," he said finally. "No," I agreed. "I'm not. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know yet." He pulled me into his arms and held me tightly. I could feel the trembling in his body, the aftermath of adrenaline, of fear, of everything he had faced in the last 12 hours. "I told you to stay safe," he murmured against my hair. I did stay safe. I stayed here. I just didn't stay passive. "You never do." He pulled back and looked at my face. His eyes were soft, softer than I had ever seen them. "Thank you. For Marco. For everything. You would have done the same for me." "Yes," he said simply. "I would." We stood there in the grey light of morning, holding each other, and I thought about how far we had come. From a maid and her employer to whatever this was, partners, allies, something that did not have a name but felt more real than anything I had ever known. "This has to end," I said quietly. "Ferrante. All of it." "I know." "When?" "Soon." His jaw tightened. "I'm going to finish this. Once and for all." "I want to be there." He started to refuse. I could see the word forming on his lips, but then he stopped. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw him recognize something he had been trying to ignore. "You're part of this now," he said, slowly. "Part of all of it?" "Yes. There's no going back from that." "I know." He nodded once. "Then you'll be there, when it ends." The end came on a rain-soaked night in April. Ferrante had been cornered, his money was gone, his allies had abandoned him, his empire, rebuilt so carefully over years of hiding, had been dismantled piece by piece, just as Dante had dismantled it the first time. All that remained was the man himself, hiding in an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by the last handful of people still loyal to him. We went at midnight. A convoy of black cars moving through empty streets, rain streaking the windows like tears. I sat beside Dante in the back seat, watching the city blur past. "Whatever happens," he said without looking at me, "stay behind me. Stay out of sight." "I will." "I mean it, Elena. This isn't like the warehouse. This is the end. Ferrante has nothing left to lose, and that makes him dangerous." "I understand." He turned to look at me then. His face was unreadable in the dim light, but his eyes were soft. "I don't regret it," he said quietly. "Any of it. Whatever happens tonight, I don't regret bringing you into this." "Neither do I." The factory loomed ahead, dark against the darker sky. The cars stopped at the gate and men moved into position, shadows with guns, circling the building like wolves. Dante looked at me one last time. He reached out and touched my face, his fingers gentle against my cheek. "Wait for me," he said. "Always." He almost smiled. Then he was gone, disappearing into the rain, and I was alone with the sound of my own heartbeat. I did not stay in the car. I had never intended to. I waited 3 minutes, long enough for the initial breach, for Dante and his men to draw attention to the front entrance. Then I slipped out of the car and moved through the shadows toward a side door that our surveillance had identified. The factory was a maze of rusted machinery and abandoned equipment. I moved carefully, keeping low, using the cover whenever I could. I could hear voices ahead. Dante's, calm and measured, and another that I did not recognize. Older, rougher, thick with hatred. Ferrante. I found a position where I could see them without being seen, a catwalk above the factory floor, hidden behind a pile of old crates. Below me, 2 men faced each other across 20 feet of concrete. Dante stood straight, his hands at his sides, his face expressionless. His suit was wet from the rain, his hair plastered to his forehead, but he looked perfectly composed, perfectly controlled. Ferrante was older than I expected, 60 at least, maybe more, with silver hair and a face that had once been handsome but was now ravaged by time and rage and obsession. He held a gun, aimed at Dante's chest. "You took everything from me," Ferrante said. His voice echoed in the empty space, bouncing off the metal walls. "My business, my reputation, my family. Your family chose their side, as did you. My daughter loved you. She would have been a good wife. Your daughter saw me as a trophy, as did you." Dante's voice was flat, emotionless. The engagement was never about peace, it was about access, about revenge. Did you think I wouldn't see it? You see everything, don't you? Ferrante's laugh was bitter. The great Dante Valenti, the man who destroyed my empire without ever getting his hands dirty, who turned my own people against me, who bankrupted me, who made me a joke in the eyes of everyone I had ever known. You started this war. You killed my brother. Your brother was weak. He wasn't fit to lead. I did your family a favor. Something flickered across Dante's face, a flash of rage so pure and cold that even from my position on the catwalk, I could feel the temperature drop. "Marco was worth 100 of you," he said quietly. "And you will never speak his name again." Ferrante's hand trembled. The gun wavered slightly. "I'm going to kill you," he said, slowly, "the way you killed everything I loved. You can try." For a long moment no one moved. The rain hammered against the factory roof. The shadows pressed closer. Then Ferrante's face twisted with rage, and he pulled the trigger. I did not see where the bullet went. I only saw Dante move. Faster than I would have thought possible, faster than any man his size should be able to move. He closed the distance between them in 3 strides, his hand striking Ferrante's wrist and sending the gun spinning into the darkness. What happened next, I forced myself to watch. If I was going to be part of this world, I needed to see it. I needed to know what it meant. It was brutal. It was efficient. And when it was over, Dante was standing over Ferrante's body, his chest heaving, his hands red with blood that was not his own. He looked up and saw me on the catwalk. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain kept falling. The world kept turning. And somewhere in the silence, something fundamental shifted between us. "I told you to wait in the car," he said finally. "I know. You never listen. I know." He smiled then, a real smile, exhausted and relieved, and something else I could not quite name. "Come down," he said. "It's over." I climbed down from the catwalk. I crossed the factory floor, stepping carefully around the debris and the bodies. I walked into his arms and let him hold me while the rain washed everything clean. "Is he dead?" I asked. "Yes." "Are you all right?" "I don't know." He pulled back and looked at my face. "Are you?" "I don't know either." We stood there for a long time, holding each other, letting the reality of what had happened sink in. The war was over. Ferrante was dead. The threat that had hung over us for months, over his organization, over his people, over everyone we cared about, was finally gone. "Let's go home," Dante said quietly. Home. The word sounded different now, fuller, more real. "Yes," I said. "Let's go home." The drive back was quiet. I leaned against Dante's shoulder and watched the city pass by, the lights blurring in the rain. Neither of us spoke. We did not need to. When we reached the house, we did not go inside. Instead, Dante led me to the garden, to the porch where I had first seen him, standing in the dark months ago, watching the rain. We sat side by side in the old wooden chairs. The rain had stopped, and the sky was beginning to clear. Stars emerged through gaps in the clouds, bright and cold and impossibly distant. "I keep thinking about my brother," Dante said quietly. I waited. He would have handled this differently. Better, probably. He was always the better man. He paused. "But he's gone, and I'm still here. And I don't know what that means." "Maybe it doesn't have to mean anything," I said. "Maybe it just is." He turned to look at me. In the starlight, his face was soft, unguarded. "You're different than I expected," he said. So are you. When I gave you that card, that test, I thought I was just looking for someone honest, someone who would tell me the truth. He shook his head slowly. I didn't expect to find someone who would change everything. I didn't expect to be changed. He reached for my hand. His fingers were warm, calloused, gentle. What happens now? I asked. Now we live, he said. We rebuild. We try to be better than the people who came before us. And if we can't, then we try anyway. We sat there until the stars began to fade and the sky turned pink with dawn. We did not speak. We did not need to. When the first rays of sunlight touched the garden, Dante turned to me. I need to ask you something, he said. What? Stay. Not as an employee? Not as an advisor? As... He stopped, struggled for words that did not come easily to a man like him. As my partner, my equal, my... Your what? My wife. The word hung in the air. Between us, unexpected and simple and enormous. You're proposing, I said slowly. Badly, apparently. No. I felt a smile spread across my face. Not badly, just surprisingly. Is that a yes? I looked at him. At this man who had seen me when I was invisible, who had tested me with trust instead of suspicion, who had let me into the darkest parts of his world and had not been afraid when I did not look away. I thought about everything that had led us here. The loss, the violence, the choices made in the dark when no one was watching. I thought about $62 and a little girl who was still alive because I had said yes to something I did not understand. Yes, I said. It's a yes. He kissed me then, slowly, gently, as if we had all the time in the world, and maybe we did. The wedding was small, held in October in the same garden where we had watched the sunrise. Marcus came, my brother, 19 now, his first year of college paid for by scholarships and an anonymous donor he had stopped questioning. He cried when he walked me down the aisle. I cried too. A handful of Dante's most trusted people stood witness. The rebuilt organization, leaner now, made up of people who had proven their loyalty through months of war. No one else. I wore a simple white dress. He wore a suit that fit him perfectly. We promised each other things that might have been impossible, but we said them anyway. That was what marriage was, I was beginning to understand. A bet against the darkness, a choice to believe in something you could not prove. That night, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet, we returned to the porch. The same chairs, the same view, but everything was different now. I never thought I would have this, Dante said quietly. Have what? Any of it. Peace. A future. Someone who... He stopped, shook his head. I spent so long fighting that I forgot what I was fighting for. And now? Now I know. He turned to look at me. It was always you. From the moment I handed you that card, it was always you. You didn't know that then. Maybe not, but I know it now. He reached for my hand. Is that enough? I thought about the question, about everything we had been through, everything we had lost, everything we had found in the wreckage. Yes, I said. It's enough. We sat there until the stars came out, bright and cold and infinite above us. We did not talk about the future. We did not need to. The future would come when it came. For now there was this, a garden full of roses, a sky full of stars, and a love that had grown in the dark places where nothing else could survive. It was not a fairy tale. It had never been one. But it was ours. And that was all that mattered. I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, invisible, grieving, surviving one day at a time. I thought about the choices she had made, the ones that had seemed small at the time but had turned out to be everything. $62. A child I did not know. A kindness that cost me nothing and changed everything. I had not known, standing in that pharmacy in the rain, that I was being watched. I had not known that the choice I was making would ripple outward, touching lives I could not imagine, opening doors I did not know existed. I had simply done what seemed right. and in doing so, I had become someone new. Dante's hand tightened around mine. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "About beginnings," I said. "About how they happen when you're not looking." "And endings?" "We're not there yet." "No," he agreed. "We're not." The stars turned slowly overhead. The night deepened around us, and somewhere in the distance, a new day was waiting to begin. We would be ready for it. Together.